Also, I want to make sure you're aware of DevCon. The 2012 DevCon has been announced, and we are planning on being in Berlin on November 5th, 6th, and 7th, and in San Jose on November 13th, 14th, and 15th. So we really hope to see you there. That'll be great. Last year's was a lot of fun. I've enjoyed looking at the speaking submissions, and we got excellent topics. It was really hard. We just couldn't fit everything in. Some excellent submissions unfortunately have to be put off this year. So we're really excited about this DevCon. It's top quality material. So, and last announcement is next month's Tech Talk Live. We normally try to have these on the first Wednesday of each month, but that conflicts with the U.S. July 4th holiday this year. So next month's Tech Talk Live will be on July 11th. And topic is the new mobile SDKs. We'll have the engineer responsible for the Android SDK and for the iOS SDK. And they'll be discussing how you can leverage those in your own solutions. Really looking forward to that one. So that's it on the announcements. Definitely appreciate everybody's attendance. So today we've got with us Rory Weatherall. He's one of the founding engineers at Alfresco. He's been around since the beginning, and he's our guru, go-to guy on all sorts of topics. Today he's discussing his focus of the last, I don't know, Roy, how long has it been, a year that you've been handling records management? Yeah, about that now. So excellent. We're really glad you're willing to spend the day with us, the morning with the hour with us discussing your work on records management. So you wanted to give us a little bit of a discussion of where we're at now. And I can see your slides okay, so it looks like that's all set up. And if anybody has questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. I'll probably interrupt with a few questions as we go along, and we'll be able to have a conversation about this. So with that, Roy, let's hear about Records Management 2.0.
Okay, great. Thanks, Richard. Good afternoon, morning, wherever you are, people. It's great to be here and get this opportunity to show you what we've been doing with records management. As Richard said, now my focus has been pretty much purely records management now for probably just over a year. That focus has been about, taking where we were and trying to progress that a bit further so that we can really take advantage of what could be a very useful product for people. So let's just skip to, we've got a very kind of loose agenda, but I'm just going to quickly take you through where we are today, where we were and where we are, and then introduce you to do a very quick demo of 2.0. And hopefully, I see a few familiar names on the list, so I'm sure some of you are familiar with 1.0. So the demo will just quickly show you, some of the changes, and just reassure you that things are still working and looking good. And then we're going to have a quick chat about where we're going and what we want to look at next. And hopefully there'll be lots of questions you guys want to ask, and we'll have time for that as well. So where we are today, we have an implementation out there. Some of you will be familiar with. I've called it V1 in these slides, but prior to now, effectively, records management was tagged along with the main releases. So you'll probably see, I think it was 3.2R and beyond, with the main kind of Alfresco releases that you'll start seeing records management out there. It's built on top of the Alfresco core repository, as you would expect, and we just used the same techniques that a lot of you guys will be using to extend Alfresco. So that's content models, additional Java services, web scripts, behaviors and policies. So there's no sort of black magic in here. We're kind of using our own methodologies to build an extension to Alfresco. And you'll see, it's packaged as an AMP, or actually 2 amps, one for the share war and one for the Alfresco war. Now the big deal, I suppose, with the first iteration of records management was that it was DoD 5015.2 certified. And to my knowledge, I think it was the first open source sort of product to gain that certification. And that was the real focus of that initial effort. So that's why historically you will have seen we use a lot of the similar concepts to the DoD, and I'm sure there are some people who haven't had a chance to have this access to the engineers and are probably scratching your heads wondering why we made some of the decisions in that first iteration, and I guarantee it probably comes down to that DoD focus. But we'll talk a bit more about that a bit later on. As I said, we use the content modeling, standard Alfresco content modeling, and nothing there has changed. And that gives us kind of like a core kind of set of modeling constructs and content services built around records management, specifically for records management, that will kind of complement, all the other content services that you'd normally expect from Alfresco. The original version is a share UI integration, and we use the concepts of sites to control the file plans. As I've already mentioned, it was one of the few open source records management implementations out there. So we won't dwell too much on 1.0. Instead, we'll look forward to the new world. So with version 2, as we're calling it, or Themis, you may see if you have a look around in Jira, you may have seen the code word Themis banded around. This is our next iteration. So if I take a step back and kind of explain what we've been doing for the last, say, maybe 14 months. Recently I was relocated to Sydney, and with that move, my focus was kind of changed to records management. And the task was to kind of look at where we were with version 1, try and look at what the gaps between where version 1 was and where something that is useful needs to be. Because I think we were quite happy to hold our hands up and say, there are a lot of pretty key functional gaps, that kind of made 1.0 not as useful as it could be, and prevented some people from really kind of adopting it. So we wanted to kind of try and identify those and start to build more of a roadmap and an understanding of what a useful records management module for Alfresco would be, outside the scope of simply being a DoD 5015 certified product. So that's really where 2.0 is born out of, and that's why I don't think we're claiming it's a silver bullet yet, but what we've tried to do is fill in some of the gaps with some really kind of strategic decisions about the features that we add to kind of slowly start to build some momentum back behind the product. And we'll talk about some of the things that we specifically that we've looked at. It's fully compatible, backwards compatible with version 1. So in the usual Alfresco way, if you apply the module, the version 2 module to an existing RM installation, you'll see that your data and everything gets migrated forward using the kind of similar patch mechanisms. So that means that there's no issue with kind of pulling your installations forward. As well as a couple of strategic features, we've also been focusing on the customization and extensibility of the module itself. Clearly, records management is not a kind of one-fits-all kind of application. Even more so, than other kind of content applications in some respects. Everybody has a different idea of what they need and needs different parts of the records management offering. Not to mention, of course, the various global standards that exist out there that we don't address yet. So a lot of the work, probably well over half of the work, is kind of really being behind the scenes and exposed far lower down than I'll address today. But it's all about shaping the product so that it's similar, it's similar in nature to the rest of Alfresco in that it's customizable, extendable. We've got sets of services that you can pick and choose from, and this will allow partners and customers to take records management and perhaps implement extensions for their own local markets. For example, perhaps a MoRec 2 extension or a financial extension. Okay, and that's really where we want to get to. 2.0 isn't fully there, but as I say, it lays a lot of the groundwork for where we want to go. Another kind of important... Yeah.
Just a quick question. One of the challenges we've had with the one OA of records management, for example, would be submitting a record as part of a workflow. Is that what part of these customization and extensibility improvements enable?
In 2.0, not so much. It does make doing things like that easier, although we don't do anything specifically. The reason I'd say it was easier is because the records management is happy to kind of understand what it needs to do to make things records, if that makes sense. So that the policies and behaviours that sit behind have been kind of tightened up. We are going to look at workflow, and that we'll probably talk about that a bit later, because we'll use workflow a lot more extensively to kind of help with the isolation between the records manager and the records user as kind of part of our push over the next kind of year to kind of add transparent records management capabilities to the module, I think. So in short, no, nothing specific today. Lots of plans, but you should find that in 2.0 those kind of things are easier to do yourself.
Excellent. Thanks for the explanation.
Okay. So another kind of important point, which will probably get lost in the mill sometimes, is that 2.0, the 2.0 records management module is now considered, at least internally, as a separate product, from an engineering standpoint. So that means that we have, we're not tied specifically to the main releases, which has been a bit of a bugbear before and can often slow down, the turnaround. So we will be able to now release point releases and patch releases and kind of support records management as a separate entity. We will have dependencies on specific, installations of Alfresco and above. So, for example, version 2 requires an installation of Alfresco 4.02 and above. But those will be, we'll try and control those as best we can so that it's absolutely clear about what you need to install. The final point is that we now expect the release at the end of July. Okay, and that's hot off the press. So I'm fairly confident that won't move. Okay, so the reason that it's taken a little bit longer than we hoped is because we want to, the last kind of 6 weeks has really been about, plugging the bugs and trying to make it as good as possible. So we felt a little bit longer was probably better in the long run. So expect it soon. So very quickly,
definitely appreciate having it done right.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's always a balance, and I think we're happy to kind of say, RM2 will be obviously, certified and product worthy. It is a little bit of a, dipping our toe back in the water. So I don't think it's not going to be super perfect when it comes out, but now we have the mechanism in place to kind of back that up with, patch releases and point releases. So I think we're pretty confident now that we can, we can actually assure that, going forward, RM is going to be a much higher quality than it has been. Which
very exciting. Thank you.
Yeah. So just quickly, so some of the key features we have in RM2, I mean, really, to be perfectly frank, particularly from, a kind of an end user point of view, the main key feature is the ability to have multi-level file plans. Now, this has been a real kind of blocking issue for many people, and I won't bore you with the history of why we made the decision we made. But needless to say, you don't need to worry anymore because it's fixed, and so that's like a headline feature, if you like. And it's I'm hoping it's a real enabling feature for everybody, so you can start to actually use it and really kind of start to dive into it. There are some new extension and configuration hooks, throughout the products. Again, we're not gonna have time to look at those in detail today, but I'm hoping that one of the kind of side projects we want to kick off internally is to get the sort of RM developer documentation developed, so that people can actually see how to do some of the stuff, rather than having to kind of fish around for themselves. we have so the custom record modeling kind of talks to the point that you know, it's just generally speaking easier to do to add new aspects, to add new record types, all that kind of stuff. We do have some predefined searches. Not a huge big deal, but it does, the search historically has been a little bit difficult to understand, and unfortunately we weren't able to address it fully in this release. So with these predefined searches, it kind of gives you a starter for 10 really, and hopefully something useful as well. A lot of the behind the scenes work, again, the APIs behind the scenes have been improved and consolidated. At the moment those are primarily Java APIs. But going forward, we have a big effort in-house to kind of pull together a kind of like a REST toolkit for our public APIs to make all those consistent, and that for us will turn into much more of a kind of handle-turning kind of process. So, you know, I'm hoping over the next kind of 6 months that those nice new APIs at the back that have been consolidated will also turn into consistent Alfresco REST APIs, which will really kind of help to make, you know, the RM offering more of a toolkit than just a, you know, an application add-on. We've also consolidated the actual implementation of the DoD spec, and this is done for 2 reasons. Firstly, because we want to, you know, the core part of the implementation we want to keep, you know, generic, because obviously you can't come in and extend it for VERS or MoRec 2 if we have DoD specific kind of concepts littered throughout the product. So and that's kind of forced our hand in terms of, you know, extending and configuring these hooks in. So although still within the RM2 AMP, if you are the type that has a look at the code, or if you're in there, you should see that the DoD implementation pieces, so the additional metadata and some of the other bits and bobs, are actually now separate things, and they're actually kind of mini examples of how you extend and configure the RM module. And I hope that's something that we can develop further going forward as well, and have our DoD implementation as an example of how you might extend the RM module. So that's the kind of...
Roy, on the multi-level file plan, just to clarify, that means that you can have more than 3 levels of folders in the hierarchy, but at this point in time it does not involve multiple record sites or multiple file plans. Is that correct?
No, that's absolutely correct, yeah. Multiple record sites and i.e. multiple file plans is something that's on the roadmap. And we'll have a little discussion about that a bit later on when we look to the future. But no, this is about, well, I can literally show you. We're gonna have a look at it right now, actually. So let me just fire up the sharing. So this is, so hopefully you can see that okay?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, excellent. So I'm a little bit nervous. It's a long time since I've done a live demo. So I honestly have run through this once before. So hopefully it will all work okay. But this is basically just a 4.0, I think this is actually a 4.01 build, but a 4.02 build essentially of Alfresco, with both the RM2 amps installed. Okay, so I'm not going to cover how you install the amps and all that kind of stuff. I think possibly most people here are familiar with that. But as you can see, I'm just going into my dashboard here, and those who are familiar with Alfresco see there's nothing particularly different. We still have the records management dashlet here, and this will take us through to our records management site. Just for the benefit of those who haven't seen this before, I mean, I haven't had a chance to load this particular instance up, but the records management site is just one of the other normal sites that you'd see. What Richard was alluding to is that at the moment we still have the limitation that you can only have one records management site per instance of Alfresco. Again, this is something we'll address. So that does mean you can only have effectively one records management cabinet at the moment, and you can use this this dashlet to kind of to take you to the records management site. So once you're in the site, the dashboard is your dashboard, and you can do what you wish with it. And there are two main parts to it. You'll see obviously it looks slightly different, but you have your file plan, and you'll see that we do use, for historical reasons and for consistency reasons mostly, we still use the names that the DoD gives the records management things. But now we've taken the names like file plan and category on board as kind of our Alfresco, the way that we in Alfresco name things. Obviously, you can change these labels, and because I appreciate that, through all the different locales, these things are called entirely different things. So I'm in my file plan. That's my file plan, and we can pop over to the record search, and this is where we issue our searches from. Okay, so that's just to give you a bit of familiarization. So without further ado, we'll start to break down. Now I have to apologize because so I did put this together a little bit late last night, so it is slightly convoluted, but hopefully it will make sense to people. So apologies if it doesn't. So what I've tried to do here is show that show some examples of how the new multi-level file plan can be used to kind of build different file plan structures. Okay, so we have a model of our HR department.
Hey, Roy.
Yeah.
Just to clarify for one of the attendees that asked, so Records Management version 1.0 is available for the version 3.3 and higher, 3.2 and higher of Alfresco, but Records Management does not work with version 4.0 yet. What Roy is demoing us is Records Management 2.0 that is expected to be released in July and will work with version 4.0.2 or newer. And so this is Alfresco 4, and it is Records Management, but this is the product that is soon to be released. It's currently in QA. So hopefully that clarifies some questions. Is that all correct, Roy?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Richard. Yeah.
So if you're on version 3 of Alfresco, you need to stay with the current Records Management module, and if you're using Alfresco 4.0, you need to stay with the current record. Then you can't use Records Management until this is released. That's
correct, yes.
So, yep. Excellent. Sorry to interrupt you, Roy.
No, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so let's have a dig into this, and I'll try and show you the different the concepts that we use now. Now, those that were familiar with 1.0 would be, very well versed in the concept of a record series. So in the old world, a record series was a root container, and then we had record category beneath it. In the new world, a record series, to all intents and purposes, doesn't exist anymore, and we just have the concepts of a record category. And a record category, if you like, is like a folder. Okay, it's a folder that you'd find in your file plan. So if we have a look at HR and we have a look at the details, you can see it is just a folder. It's got some additional information, the record category, and potentially the vital record information. But at this point in time, it's just a container. Now, the thing about a record category is that it can have a disposition schedule attached to it. Okay, and then once you attach the disposition schedule, then it becomes like the old school kind of record category. Okay. So it means that you can use it for a couple of things. In this situation, I'm using this HR container like a record series. It doesn't have a record category. It doesn't have a disposition schedule on it, sorry. It's just for containment. If we have a look at contracts, for example, you'll see that I've already set a disposition schedule up on this container. For example, we cut off when an employee leaves or retires, and then we destroy after 7 years. And that's on a folder level. So that means that, if we have a look in contracts, in my slightly convoluted example, we have a folder for each of the employees which would contain their contractual documentation. Okay, and then the disposition, as I said, says, when those leave or retire, the folder is cut off, and then we hold them for 7 years, and then they're destroyed. Okay, so you can see we've got an example here where Grace Adams has already left the company, and this record has been cut off. So if we go and have a look at the folder, we'll see. There we go. We're waiting for disposition in 2019. Okay, so that's waiting. Once we clock past that date, we'll be able to destroy this record. Okay, so that's a very quick kind of introduction to what these things look like. So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a scenario. Again, apologise if it's not very real life. It's more to exercise the various parts and give you a quick, brief overview of what's going on. Actually, before I do that, I should quickly just show you these other structures over here, just to kind of give you a flavour for the different things you can do. If we have a look at job descriptions here, you'll actually see that, click on here, we should see job descriptions, again, has a disposition schedule attached to it. We can cut it off when they're no longer needed and destroy immediately. But beneath job descriptions, I want more structure, which we couldn't do before. So we then split that up into department, engineering, marketing, sales. And these are just record categories with no disposition schedule on. Okay, and if you dig in deeper again, then we start to have the folders with the records in. And these folders will pick up the disposition schedule defined right back up here in job description. Okay, so again, we can put structure above and below the disposition schedule. Later on, we'll see how you can actually then define additional disposition schedules further down the tree. Okay, and those will be override those above it. Okay, so just with that simple kind of change in paradigm, that gives us a lot more flexibility to build the structures that people need, hopefully. So let's just pop back to my example. So there's my contract. It isn't actually my contract, I'm afraid. And obviously, 18 months ago, I moved to Australia, so I've got a new contract. So I'm going to file my new contract alongside my old one. So I did that a bit quicker. Oh no, it's okay, it's still here. So one of the changes you will notice is that record type is now multi-select. And in actual fact, this is actually data-driven, this list. Previously, this was hard-coded to the DoD record types, which are really just additional information aspects to your content model and mark them in a particular way so they appear in here automatically. But in this case, we're just going to go with a plain old record. So another new thing you'll see is if you load up a fresh Records Management 2.0, you will find there's a bunch of saved searches preloaded for you. One of those is the undeclared records. So we can use these searches down here to kind of filter our view. And obviously, again, we'll have a closer look at this in a minute. But for the sake of argument, we're just going to use the undeclared records predefined search. And so here we go. We can see Ryan's contract is still waiting declaration, as is mine. Now, for demo purposes, this is greatly simplified, obviously, because I'm logged in as a records management administrator. And I don't think we'll have time today to kind of dig into, the way that you can use the permissions and the capabilities to restrict people's views. So kind of may have to take that as read for the time being. Let's declare this record, and we have to provide, obviously, the information that is. Sorry, can you tell I can't type and talk at the same time? The information that's required in order to declare it, and we can obviously fill in some of the other metadata as well while we're here. So let's save that. So now we've filled in all the mandatory metadata, and we can go ahead and declare that record. Okay, and as you can see, that's dropped out of our search. So now obviously we've got two records in here, and they do relate to one another. In actual fact, my Australian contract has superseded my UK contract. So we can use the oops, wrong button. Apologies. We can use the we can actually cross-link these two records to kind of indicate that relationship. So let's say that my UK contract has now been superseded by my Australian contract. So I can go in here and create a new reference, and I can select the record that is superseded, my Australian. Okay, and we'll just create that link. And so in this demo, it will just create the link, but supersedes and obsolete, for those of you that are familiar with the product, do have a kind of behavior attached to them. So if we'd set up our disposition schedule in a particular way, perhaps like, for example, for the policies, you know, when one record supersedes another, you can that can be a trigger for automatic cutoff, for example. So there you go. You can see that now. My UK contract supersedes my Australian one. Actually, I think I've created that link the wrong way around, but I think you get the idea.
So, Roy, just to clarify on the file plan, which folders there contain the disposition schedules? Is that on your contracts folder, or is that on the Roy Weatherall folder?
Okay, in this example, it's the contracts folder that contains the disposition schedule. Okay, so basically any record category can contain a disposition schedule. So in this example, HR contracts could, as could engineering and marketing. At the very bottom of any tree structure, you have a record folder, and that contains your records. And those will inherit the disposition instructions from the structure above. Okay.
So you can, in this example, we have the subfolders, engineering, marketing, and sales, under the job descriptions folder that contains the disposition schedule.
Absolutely, yeah, that's correct, yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. That's so cool.
Cool. So we've done that, made that link. So let's have a quick, we'll have a quick look at search. So again, I'm not going to delve deeply into the various search syntax, but it'll be familiar to you if you're used to dealing with Alfresco. And there you can see I can search for any documents marked as Roy Weatherall, and lo and behold, they're my two contracts. And obviously these will link through to you know, the positions in the file plan. What I think, my personal opinion is that, you know, we do need to do a fair bit of work on this search area, you know, particularly to make it a lot easier for people to construct these searches. However, some of the feedback, you know, I've had is that, you know, people also like that you know, the flexibility to make what are quite complicated queries. But as you can see, what's really lacking on this panel here is the ability to multi-select and actually action upon these things. But we do have a workaround. We can actually save this search. We can save this search for later. So here we go. So now I've got there's Roy search, and it will pull it back and play it. By saving the search, it means that it will also appear in filters down the side here. And so I can click on Roy search, and we get a much more sort of friendlier place to actually work because we've got all our actions at hand. We can also...
and does that appear for all records management users, or just for the one that saved the search?
It will be for all records management users at the moment, yes. Yeah. But obviously, the search results will still be filtered by their security. So although you will be able to see the search, you may not be able to see the contents of the search. But I mean, ideally, we need to, I think Save Search is really something we need to kind of explore whether we should be adding into the core product. And if we do, then obviously we'll have to expand, you know, do you have private Save Searches, and, you know, can you share Save Searches? So at the moment, it's a very simple implementation of that.
Excellent. And there were a few follow-up questions on the FilePlan organization.
Okay.
Questions are, can you have the record folder at the bottom? Or the record category folder? Can one be inside another record category folder?
Yeah, so you can place record categories within record categories, but within a record folder, you can only place records at the moment. We don't, so if you want to build sort of structure, you kind of have to think about where you're going to put your disposition schedule. So when you kind of get to the, when you get to the point where you're going to manage records, we still have this restriction that in order to have, to kind of manage a record, it has to be contained within a record folder. And that record folder then is effectively the end of the tree, if that makes sense. But the structure above it can be as many categories within categories as you want, and then the disposition schedule can appear anywhere in that hierarchy.
Excellent, very helpful. And when we were talking a bit about the services available, one of the questions was, is there any capability to assist with automating metadata creation for a new version of a record or a superseding record?
At the moment, no, not out of the box, but it depends really how dirty you want to get your hands, I suppose. There are ways of doing that. It would require development, but the kind of the hook points are there to do that kind of stuff. Again, one of the things that we're going to look at going forward will be how we can, because another kind of hole, if you like, is that kind of, how do you extract metadata and auto-populate some of those fields required for declaration? How do you define default values for different classifications of records so that you can auto-declare them? So those are kind of things we'll look at in the future in terms of, triggering, behavior. Again, there are hook points for when references are made, and an obsolescence is a reference. And there's all the other kind of standard policy hook points that you would normally use in Alfresco, the addition of aspects and the creation of different types. And those are all, those are all standard Alfresco techniques. So, if you're kind of willing to get your hands dirty and you're kind of comfortable, customizing at that level, then you can really, all the hook points to do this kind of stuff are there. I mean, admittedly, I think a lot of the things we would like to do more out of the box and make it much easier, and I think that's going to be the next kind of, the big push to identify the things that lots of people will want to do and kind of make them much easier for them to do.
Excellent. Related to that, how is the record modeling connected to the content modeling? Is it the same facilities available?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a core records management model, and it is just a bog standard content model. So we model disposition schedules as objects, associated with record categories which extend from folder. For example, record is an aspect, and so you'll find that again, if you're working at a kind of deeper level, looking at the records management model, the content model itself, you won't see anything unusual. The real kind of trick is to understand, I suppose, what the different aspects and types kind of are doing and mean. And so the theory being that, in the same way that you would take vanilla Alfresco and write your own customized content model for your different types, you can take records management Alfresco and kind of again extend your record types and record aspects on top of the model in exactly the same way.
Excellent, very helpful.
Okay. So while we're in this search, so the point was here that as well as being able to get hold of all the different actions easily, we can also do multi-select in here. So, for example, this is quite useful let's say, for example, I'm trying to sue Alfresco because they diddled me out of some money when they moved me to Australia, which I hasten to add they didn't. And I might be taking up some sort of lawsuit. So, Alfresco is obliged to kind of, keep these documents. And so I can freeze the results of that search sort of altogether, and we'll see that they'll appear in my hold. So there we go. We've got a hold on those documents. Okay. And that's a kind of little trick you can use for kind of doing these kind of multi-select actions. And here we go. You can again see the frozen documents. Okay. Richard, how are we doing for time? Because I think that kind of covers about our 10 minutes for the demo. I think, does it? I kind of
yes, but excellent conversation. We have about 15 minutes left, and there are a couple follow-up questions to some of the discussion we've been having. Okay. We were talking about content modeling. So Mark asked if that means you can just use share custom config to create override forms for records, just like you would do with normal content. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's exactly how we implement this extension. There is a slight difference. So when you install the RM module, we do have some form config filters that get added, and the reason for that is because well, it's difficult to kind of without actually digging in too deeply, but for those that are familiar, you'll know that you can add custom properties to records management types through the administration UI. In actual fact, let's just jump into that very quickly. So here we go, because this has changed a little bit as well. So you can see that we can add custom data, we can add custom fields in here, for example. Let's just quickly create that. Okay, so now that means all of my records will have this new custom metadata. Now, ordinarily, if you're familiar with the form stuff, you will know that you would have to go in and edit that form and add that field for it to appear. But because these are well-known custom metadata fields and they're handled in a particular way, the filter will automatically add those as it goes through. Now, in old RM, the way that we implemented that was by hiding everything, and then by showing everything and hiding what we didn't want, and we did that for all the different, for the content type and for the folder type as well. And that has a knock-on effect in 1.0 that if you have a custom type, or you have aspects added to a content kind of type, that those fields weren't shown. So that approach really doesn't work. So that's all been refactored in 2.0, so that you have forms for the different. We have a new form filter which relates to the type of record artifact that it is, i.e., and by artifact we mean kind of the records management thing. So is it a file plan? Is it a record category? Is it a schedule? Is it a record folder? Okay, so kind of agnostic of the actual content type. And you can actually then define a form for that artifact, records management artifact, and that will get applied on top of whatever form gets pulled back for the content type. So that has a knock-on effect that if you have a piece of content that has the doubling core aspect applied, for example, in your share site, and you file it, you'll still see all those forms, and even if it's like, for example, your custom type, your SOP type, you'll still see all of your properties as you expect, plus these kind of these additional forms for that type of records management thing.
Very good.
So that was a long answer for really yes, I think is the short answer. But it's actually quite a significant change. I think it's actually quite a powerful change.
So how would I go about making it so that I had different metadata properties for different record folders in the file plan?
Yeah, now that is a little bit trickier, but it is possible. So at the moment, what you would have to do is extend. So there are two problems. Obviously, one is knowing which type of record folder you want to create, which is the real problem, I suppose. So you can take a record folder and you can extend it in exactly the same way that you would any other kind of normal content type in the core model. And theoretically, you can add your additional properties. So the trick is then, how do you know which type of record folder to create? I'm not quite sure I have a clever answer for that at the moment, because but that may involve, adjusting the kind of the action in some way to make a decision. But then you're kind of home free, because there's no reason why then you can't define your own forms to show the different properties that you want, just as normal. So I think, again, the short answer is that it's theoretically possible, not something that I've tried. I'd be interested to see how far people got with that, because it should be something we should allow people to do, definitely.
Excellent, very helpful. The additional follow-up question: if I create a custom type and to extend the RM record as the parent, and I add content of that type to a record folder via a CMS web service, is that a valid way to file a record? And it sounds like most of the extension services at this point are in Java, and you're still, the REST interface is down the road. Is plumbing there to record via CMS or some other remote service?
Yeah, so you broke up a little bit there, Richard, but if I understand you correctly, you're kind of asking, how do you, it's essentially, I suppose the question is, in one part, can you file records from, another integration API, i.e. CIFS or WebDAV or FTP or whatever? And the short answer is yes, you should be able to. In 1.0, it didn't like it very much, and that should be resolved in 2.0. And the reason for that is that, again, we use the just standard technique of using policies to control things when they're filed. So if you place a document into a record folder, it will automatically understand what you're doing, and it will kick off the behavior to file that thing, and that will build the give it its ID and build all the other relationships and pick up the disposition schedule and stuff. So when you see the file dialog, all that's really doing is doing a standard upload. Okay, and when the upload's finished, it's obviously created that primary association, and that kicks off a behavior, and then that in turn kicks off the sort of filing process, which is then where's my disposition schedule? Has it been applied? What's my unique ID, and all those kind of things. So in principle, yes, I think the answer is.
Excellent. So there's about 10 minutes left, and I've got about 6 questions here. Perhaps we should take your discussion of what comes after RM 2.0 and push that to another webinar where we can spend significant time on that, because you mentioned feeling very constrained on trying to cram that in. And we can spend the rest of the time discussing some of these questions. Does that sound okay, Roy? Yeah,
that's fine, yeah.
Excellent. So Kyle asks, the declare records based on rules. The use case might be when a document type's property may be set to status equals final, and a record object is filed to a predesignated place. So how would you declare it from a share site based on a rule?
Okay, yeah, and this is, so we're kind of, ironically, in a way, talking about where we want to go next. So I don't have a definitive answer about how you do it now. I'm sure you probably can, because, again, we're dealing with standard rules and standard bits and pieces. So at 2.0, it would be a little bit of, just use the standard rules. You might have to write some extended rules to kind of, possibly automatically declare, to get through to the declare action at the back. All feasible. Going forward in 2.1, this is the part of this is the real key thing that we want to address, and I think it's the next really big gap, and the thing that's really missing from making this much more useful for people, and that's the ability of kind of having records management become transparent for the user, and that's being able to declare rules that perhaps automatically file based on the status, perhaps automatically extract default information from both the file and from the context to help guide where that should be classified, to be able to define all these rules, as I said, based on the various records management kind of statuses. To use workflow as well, I think, to kind of put that kind of abstraction barrier between the user and the records manager, so the user can kind of, say, well, I have something, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a record, so let's kick the process off, and the records manager sits on the back end of that and can understand where that needs to go. So, as I said, I think the key thing to take away is that, again, when you dig into records management, you find we don't use anything weird. Okay, it's all standard Alfresco techniques, and that gives me a lot of confidence to be able to say, well, I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly how to do that, but I'm sure if you look at how we would normally do this kind of thing in a customization with the normal rule structure and using the kind of server action backend, you'll probably find a relatively straightforward way of doing it. But my hope is that, as I say, going forward, this kind of stuff will be more bread and butter. It will be part of, the records manager will have the controls there to be able to set up these rules easily.
Good to know. So how has the permission model changed between version 1 of records management and version 2?
Not a great deal. A lot of effort's gone into the back end, because the implementation of the capability stuff wasn't the best. It was causing us a lot of performance issues, and it was also very difficult to maintain and very verbose. So, and ultimately, I think we'd like to see that capability, those capability features available throughout the product. We've had a number of sort of partners and customers say, well, we only really want kind of that bit, and there's also been talk about, having capabilities and roles applied to just normal sites, so people have creation capabilities and administrative capabilities. So, that's kind of like a first step. It's kind of two steps, really. One is to really make that capability side of things maintainable through config, ultimately allow partners and customers to actually customize the capabilities and add their own and remove the ones they don't want. And also to kind of start to get it into a shape where we can generalize it. In terms of the permissions, nothing's really changed. We kind of start from the point of view that the file plan is sacred, so unless you're given access to it, you can't see anything. You have to have a role. You have to have a records management role to see the file plan, but not necessarily to see the site. I think one of the points of confusion is how the collaboration kind of roles, if you like, for a site correspond to the roles of the file plan, I think we really need to address that, and I think part of the reason we haven't is because we haven't had a chance to sit down and really understand what it means, and I'd like to see that there not be that confusion there. At the moment, the best way to think of it is that when you enter the top of the file plan, you are in a kind of a new controlled world, and you may have access to the site, and that might mean, if the site is customized and it has different kind of, widgets and gadgets on it, you can see all of that, and all your kind of site permissions apply to that. But when you dig into the file plan, then you're in the realms of, do I have a records management role, and do I have the capabilities to do things? I think the other thing that confuses people as well is once you get into the file plan, the normal inheritance mechanism that you'll find in the rest of Alfresco doesn't apply. So when you set a permission at a particular point, that isn't inherited down, it is inherited down the tree, but it's inherited manually, okay? So it's not like, normally you'd set a permission at the top and all the permissions of the folders beneath it are set to inherited, and that's not the case in RM. So we manually say if you've got a filing permission at level 3 levels down, then you'll be able to read all the way down to there, and then you'll be able to file beneath it. Okay. If new things are added, you then have to decide. Do I want it to inherit or do I not? Okay. So I'd agree. It is a little bit confusing at the moment, but I guess, and I'm sure we could do a lot to clarify it. I think the underlying implementation is correct. It's just the way that we present it. And obviously, because permissions and control are very important in RM, you don't want people to see the wrong thing. I think we're erring on the side of caution at the moment, in that it will it's easier to not be able to see something than it is to see something, which is perhaps a better position to be in for sensitive records.
That makes sense. There's a request for a blog post or a wiki page or to better document that process.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping.
Model.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping. Obviously, at the moment, we're heads down and trying to get 2.0 out, and I'm hoping, obviously, when that kind of that process kind of starts to come to a conclusion, it will give me a chance to kind of put my head up and obviously start to think about, you know, where we're going, but also to start to, you know, informally blog and pull together some sort of hints and tips and, you know, how you can extend this stuff. So fingers crossed.
Excellent.
We'll try and make the time to do that.
Well, we're just about out of time, but maybe we can get short answers to some very quick, to a number of questions. And if they're going to take longer ones, we'll have to follow up with those answers offline, maybe in a blog post or something like that. But how does records management in 4.0, how will that relate to Solar?
Okay, that's quick. We don't support Solar entirely, so we still require Lucene in this release. That's because we need to do some work. We need some additional support, primarily for the list of values for Solar to support those correctly. So 2.0 needs Lucene. Hopefully 2.1 won't.
Excellent. And what about multi-tenancy support?
Again, so on the roadmap, very high up on the roadmap is the ability to have multiple records management sites, and that will obviously naturally give you an easier way to kind of break down your sites. In terms of multi-tenancy, again, I think that will come with those multi-sites. We're gonna. I don't want to say it supports multi-tenancy today because we're not certifying that on 2.0, but there's a good chance you could probably get a fair way. I'm not sure if anybody's tried it in earnest, but I would expect the kind of, you know, that again is around the 2.1 kind of sort of time frame.
Excellent. And what is the plan with records management regarding the cloud product?
That's a good question. I don't know. That's the answer. I think. I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I suspect that when we get to the point where we have a that's when it starts to become suitable for a hosted cloud environment, because then, you know, the end users really don't have to change their way of thinking. You know, just some things start to become records, and they have some additional actions which may be record related, and obviously then the records managers have their own little slot which may not be, so, you know, may not be in the cloud. It may be, you know, on premise. Honest answer is I don't know, but I suspect it will be a while before we get there, because we have to do some groundwork in RM first.
That makes sense. And so the current plan is to release records management for Community Edition in the next Community Edition release after 4.0.2 of Enterprise Edition. Is that correct? Honestly,
we haven't had that discussion, so I can't guarantee it, but I suspect that would be right. But I can't. I'm afraid I can't guarantee that, obviously. So it's a bit of a caveat, but I can't at the moment see why we wouldn't want to do that. We don't have a history.
And we're still getting that. Excellent.
Okay.
We're still working on getting that Community Edition release scheduled, so we don't have a date for that yet either.
Okay.
And last question is, how does the aspects behind records management relate to CMIS policies?
I don't actually know anything about CMIS policies, so I do know, what I can tell you is that we use the Alfresco internal policies and behaviors to trigger kind of some of the behaviors that you'll see. So, you know, documents being filed, and some of the obsolescence behavior and all that kind of stuff. So it may be that when I've been using the word policy, that's kind of been, that's an overloaded kind of definition. We call, you know, the events and behaviors that we use inside Alfresco, we also refer to as policies. So I honestly don't know how they relate to the CMIS ones.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Roy. we definitely appreciate your time spending with us. We will need to schedule a follow-up once you get Records Management 2.0 out to discuss the future roadmap. But I think you answered a lot of questions about RM 2.0. We're very excited about it. To close very quickly, because we are past our hour, we hope to see you next July on the 11th for the next Tech Talk to discuss the mobile SDKs, both Android and iOS. We hope you save the date for DevCon in Berlin on November 5th through 7th, and in San Jose on the 13th through 15th. And last thing is, after this session, you'll be directed to the community survey. And again, we would very much appreciate your feedback. We use that survey to decide how we will spend our time over the next year, and we will share the results with you. So it's well worth your time. It's very interesting, and it's fairly short. We certainly appreciate it. So again, that's today's Tech Talk Live. We appreciate everybody attending and the excellent participation, good questions. I learned a lot. And thank you very much, Roy.
No problem. Thanks, everyone.